In this screencast, we're going to set up our project directory. I'll open up the terminal and I will move to the desktop, and we're going to make a directory for our project. But before I tell you our project name, let me explain to you what our project's going to be. I can't tell you the number of times I've found myself building a mini Node application and I need some kind of database. And what would be ideal is something like SQLite, where I don't have to have a database process running. It's a serverless database. It just works with a single file. However, I prefer using a document-oriented database like MongoDB instead of a SQL database like SQLite. So the package we're going to make in this screencast series is a simple JavaScript database that stores everything in a single JSON file. So there won't be any server process. We'll just have a package that will basically give us a nice front end to a large JavaScript object that will be saved to a JSON file. And we're going to call this JSON database born. So we'll make a directory called born, and let's cd into born. And now that we're inside this directory, we want to initialize it with the template that we installed in the last screencast. So we will run grunt-init, and the template was called node. And now this will ask us a series of questions. So we start with the project name. Born is fine. As you can see, we have the default in parentheses here. It gets this from the folder that we're in, so that's good. Then we need a description. We'll say a simple serverless database stored in a JSON file. That's a good version number. The repository will actually be, let me copy this, I'll paste it in, and I'll change the username there to Andrew8088/born.git. That's good. The homepage will be, that's fine. Issue tracker, that's fine too. We'll use the MIT license, that's the author name. My email address has changed, so we'll put that there. It's a good URL. What version of Node does it run on? The default again is fine, and the main entry point will be lib/born.js. That's good. The NPM test command can be a shortcut for grunt node unit, so that's good as well. This project will not be tested on Travis CI, and we don't need to make any changes, so that's great. There we go. All right, now what this has done is given us a bunch of files to start with here. You can see we have the grunt file, the license file, the readme, the lib, and the test directories, and then package.json. Now, if I open up package.json, you can see this is where a lot of that information in the little questionnaire that we just filled out went. And down here at the bottom, we have a bunch of development dependencies. And these are what we need to install now. So we're going to go ahead and run npm install to go ahead and install those packages. Once those packages have finished installing, you can see that things are starting to shape up. For example, let me go ahead and cat out our lib/born.js, and you can see that they give us a really simple module to start with here. And I can cat out test/born test, and you can see we have a really simple test suite set up to run against that single example method that our template gives us. And with all this in place, we can immediately run grunt node unit, and you can see that our tests are actually running just fine. Now, this is just the one sample assertion they give us in the template, but you can see everything is set up so we could start writing our code right away. However, we need to make a few changes to this setup. This is set up right now to run tests perfectly within Node, but we want to be able to run tests on the browser side as well, remember. So we have to set that up. So I'm going to cd out of this directory and back to the desktop. And let's go ahead and do a git clone. And I'm going to paste in this URL here. This is github.com/ I believe that's pronounced /nodeunit.git. Now, as you just saw, we're using node unit on the server side. However, we can also use node unit on the client side as well. However, we need to get the right version of node unit and tweak our setup a little bit so that this will run in the browser. So the first step for this is cloning the node unit project from GitHub. And now that that's downloaded, let's cd into that directory. And if you look here, you can see we have a make file right here. And I happen to know that if we run make browser, it will go ahead and make the version of node unit that we need for the browser. So go ahead and do that. And as you can see, that didn't take long at all. As you can see here, we have distribute/browser/test is where the version of node unit that we need is kept. So I'm going to move back to the desktop, and I'm going to do copy everything from node unit /distribute/browser/test star for all the files in there. And we're going to copy those all into our born/test directory. Now let's cd back into born, and if we list the files that are in test, you can see we got a bunch of things here, but we actually don't need most of these. So I'm going to remove everything in the test folder that starts with test dash. And as you can see, that will give us these 5 files here, which are actually just test suites for Node Unit itself. All right, so now if we list everything in test, you can see we're down to the born test.js file that we had originally ourselves, the Node Unit CSS and JS files, and then test.html. So let's go ahead and open up test/test.html. Let's remove these extra source elements here. We want to change this one to test_born. But of course, before that, we're just going to need lib/born.js, actually /lib born.js, because the test.html is in the test directory. That's good. Now, down here, we'll remove most of these test suites except one, which we will call test_born. And let's fix the name on this side as well. So we have Node Unit running one test suite called test_born, which will be in the test_born variable. Now this variable right here, we will get from the test_born.js file. Oh, and actually, I'm sorry, that's not test_born, that's born_test. So let's make it that down here as well. So now let's go ahead and open up test/born_test. We've got a bunch of stuff going on in this file. This main comment here is just a handy little Node Unit reference, as you can see right here. I'm going to remove this in our case, but you may find this helpful if you haven't used Node Unit before. If you've used JavaScript on the server and on the browser, you know that we cannot use exports like this on the browser because this won't be available in the same way that it is on the server side. However, we can use a handy trick, which is replacing exports with this. Inside a module like this will refer to that exports object. However, on the client side, this will refer to the global object or the window object. And so whatever property we create will be a global property that we can then use in our test.html file. So as we just said, this property is going to be called born test. So in here, we can change this to this.born_test. Now we won't change our test here just yet. However, the other thing you should know that we can't do on the client side is where we have this require statement here. This will only work on the server side. And of course, we don't really need this on the client side because if we're on the client, we get the born variable from our lib/born here in the HTML. So what we have to do is say if the type of require is not equal to undefined, then we'll go ahead and get born. Otherwise, we will not do anything because we get born from the HTML file, remember. One other thing I want to do, because born will be a constructor function, I'm just going to capitalize the B there, which means we'll have to capitalize the B down here as well. So that should be all we need to change in this file. And I think this file is where it needs to be. The last thing we need to do to prepare our tests to run both on the client and the server is open up the actual lib/born file itself. It's very simple to start with, but let's go ahead and expand it a bit. So the first thing I want to do is wrap everything in a function that will execute immediately. And currently I'm doing that by doing call this. So now everything inside this will be run immediately. And just as in the test file, we can't use this exports command. So what I'm going to do instead here is we'll create a born object. This will be a function later on, but right now we'll just leave it as an object. And then we'll make awesome here a property of born. Then down here at the bottom, we can say if type of exports is not equal to undefined, then what we will do is say module.exports equals born, which will be the function that we are going to create up here. If exports is undefined, then we can say window.born will equal born. So now everything should be set up to run our tests just fine in the browser. And so we'll flip back to the terminal here and I can do open test/test.html. And you can see here that we have this big green bar at the top, which means our tests are running just fine here in the browser. Excellent. And if we come back here to the terminal, I can once again do grunt node unit, and you can see things are running just fine here. Alternatively, our package.json file has actually created a shortcut for us, so we can do npm test, and it will go ahead and run the assertions that way. npm test is just a few characters less to type. So you could do that if you prefer. Either way, you can see that our one assertion is passing both in the browser and on the server, so we are ready to start actual development.